I want to begin this evening with something called the Five Recollections. This comes from a text called the Upajjhatana Sutta, which is part of the Anguttara Nikaya. It's one of those big, thick books on the second shelf over there from the Pali Canon. So this is the text of that sutta. There are these five facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Which five? I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. This is the first fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. This is the second fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. This is the third fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. This is the fourth fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. This is the fifth fact that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. These are the five facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. What I want to talk about tonight is something that I think it's really important, and it's important in a number of really practical ways. But it's also important for a number of really spiritual reasons. First thing I should probably do is give you a little context, though, so this maybe makes a little more sense where I'm coming from and why I think this is such an important thing. I haven't told a lot of kind of personal stories in these Dharma talks. I suspect that maybe because of having seen a lot of clergy over the years who seem to believe that the best way to make any point is to tell a long, intimate, personal story about themselves that often is pretty tangential to the actual topic that they're trying to talk about. I think in this case, though, it's necessary. A little self-disclosure will be beneficial. I recently turned 57 years old. That might seem like sort of a strangely not round number to think of as a milestone, but in my case, it definitely is. My mother's father died at 56 from about his fifth heart attack. My father's father died at 55 from about his third heart attack, and my father died at 53 from his third heart attack. The women on both sides of my family, on the other hand, just seem to live for frickin' ever. But I was 25 when my dad died, and since my father named me after himself, not my mother's idea, that means that for over half my life now, there's been a tombstone in Fayetteville, West Virginia, with my name on it, which is a little bit of an Ebenezer Scrooge kind of an experience to live with for most of your life. So as a result of that kind of personal experience, the emphasis that we have in Buddhism on impermanence and the need to deal with our mortality is an aspect of the faith that I just think is really important. I think it's really critical. Of all the things that Buddhism emphasizes, it's one of the most important. Now, that's not unique. That's not unique about Buddhism. It's a pretty common element that you can find in most, if not all, of the world's religious traditions, one form or another. There's an emphasis on those things, on mortality, right? On sort of facing the fact of our own mortality. In the Western tradition, if you think about the philosophers of the classical world, if you go back to like Greece and Rome, if you think about the Stoics, in particular Stoic philosophy from ancient Greece and Rome, memento mori, remember that you have to die. Christianity actually adopted that phrase, continued to use that phrase, memento mori. Um, the attention on the importance of sort of paying attention to mortality and death is something that Christianity also got from the Jewish tradition. Though, if you look, for example, at the most obvious places, then, if you're familiar with the Bible and Ecclesiastes, right, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, right? So mortality is right there. The other faith traditions that have their roots in India, like Buddhism does, also include the spiritual value of meditating on mortality, but the Buddhists stressed it probably most of all of them. Maranasati, mindfulness of death. That's the Sanskrit term for this, Maranasati. It's a practice that was encouraged by the Buddha and encouraged by all the teachers that came after him throughout the tradition. They encourage us to meditate on our own mortality, to even meditate on the stages of the decomposition of a corpse, right? How the body breaks down and returns to the earth, especially those of our loved ones, right? To actually meditate on the decomposing bodies of our loved ones. Meditating in places associated with death, meditating in carnal grounds, in cremation grounds, in cemeteries, other places associated with death. They urge their disciples to be prepared for death all the time, given that it can happen at any moment, right? In less than the time that it takes to chew and swallow a bite of food or to take a breath. We can go from being alive to not being alive. So these Buddhist masters were concerned with the spiritual benefit of mindfully preparing for death. And that's still important in our modern society. But today, there's a whole kind of additional layer of preparation that we should do that's just really very practical, but is also very spiritual if we approach it with the possibility of being a spiritual lesson, of having a spiritual benefit from it. In our legalistic culture, there are aspects of preparing for death that obviously were not a thing in the Buddhist era. We're not a thing in that world. Everybody should have a will, right? Everyone should think about and make a decision about organ donation. Obviously, that wasn't a thing 2,600 years ago, right? Most of us should probably have a medical power of attorney, have a living will. All of us need to think about and make some decisions about, or should anyway, what we want done with this body when we're done with it. What kind of ceremony or ritual events we want to have happen after we're gone for the benefit of our friends and our family and our loved ones. The practical reasons to take those kinds of steps are really obvious. If we have a will, then any wealth or possessions we leave will be dealt with according to our wishes, and that'll avoid delays, it'll avoid unnecessary expenses, unnecessary legal expenses, unnecessary taxation, those sorts of things. Probate, all that stuff our families aren't going to want to have to deal with. Appointing a medical power of attorney, having a living will, those are things that can help ensure that the health care that we get if we're catastrophically ill or injured and potentially dying will be what we want it to be, will be consistent with our wishes. The spiritual benefits may not be as obvious, but they're still there. They certainly still exist. Going through the process of creating these kinds of legal documents and more importantly maybe the thinking, right, the decisions that are involved in what you have to do to create those legal documents. That's a form of maranasati. That's a form of being mindful of our mortality. Refusing to do those things, procrastinating on doing those things, is often a sign of we're kind of denying our mortality. We're trying to just not think about it, just trying to block out the inevitable, right? Block out the inevitability of the fact that we're all going to die. And that's obviously spiritually unhealthy, to just sort of try to lock it in a closet and forget about it rather than face it and deal with it. Reviewing those documents regularly, maybe like every year. Again, there's practical reasons to do that, to make sure that they still work and they're still accurate and so on. But that's also an opportunity for spiritual practice, for that to be a spiritual practice, to have that reminder, to do that with some regularity. The spiritual value of compassion is really important here too. By taking care of these things in advance, we're saving our friends and our loved ones of a lot of agonizing decisions later on, that if we don't deal with them, then they'll have to deal with these. If they know what our wishes are concerning life-extending medical care, if we legally put one person in charge of our medical care through doing something like a durable medical power of attorney, then that can reduce that kind of stress and strain on our loved ones that they'll have to deal with. If we're sick or injured and are in a position where we can't make those kinds of decisions for ourselves. A will can help our loved ones avoid conflict in the future, conflict among themselves over what to do with our stuff, what to do with our possessions and property and money and so on. Leaving our loved ones some guidance about ceremonies or rituals after our deaths can help them. Again, it's one less thing for them to have to think about later on, right? One less thing for them to have to decide. It'll make them feel like they're doing something beneficial for us if they make sure that those things are done in a way that we've sort of described. Now, there's a lot of different systems that have been created for handling these kinds of things. I don't know about you. You may have seen this too online. Over the last, I don't know, just 3 or 4 months, maybe, I keep seeing, maybe it's because of my age, I don't know what, but I'm seeing a lot of ads on social media stuff for, what's it called, Knockbox or Knoxbox or something like this. It's this system you can order. It's kind of a big plastic file box. It's got all these folders and stuff in it and blank forms. The idea being it can kind of walk you through the whole process of having all of these things and having everything sorted, and your family knows exactly where everything is. So if worse comes to worse and then something unfortunate happens, they know where to go find all these documents. I haven't looked into it. I know if I click on it, they'll follow me for the rest of my life. You know how that works online. So I haven't clicked on it. I'm sure it's pricey. It probably costs an arm and a leg. But I actually want to show you something it's very simple. It's very inexpensive. It covers probably covers the most important stuff. It doesn't cover everything, but covers the most important stuff. I actually learned about this when I was in my seminary program, my second seminary program. I did this. My wife did it. I asked my mom to do it as well. I kind of walked her through it. I'm sure it isn't right for everybody. Again, it's pretty simple and straightforward and streamlined, and so for some people it might be way oversimplified and insufficient, depending on the complexity of somebody's estate and family situation and that sort of thing. But it's a good kind of simple foundation. It'd be a good starting point if nothing else. It's called a 5 wishes document. It's got these 5 parts, for kind of 5 main things that it walks you through. It takes you through the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't, the kind of stuff the medical power of attorney that deals with. The kind of medical treatment I want or don't want, which is what a living will is about. How comfortable I want to be. That gets into like palliative medication and painkiller, pain relief and that sort of stuff. How I want people to treat me, what I want my loved ones to know. So this document, based on the questions that are in it, actually works legally as a medical power of attorney and a living will in all but 4 states, West Virginia included. Ohio, unfortunately, is one of the 4 states where it's not legal. There's really particular things, apparently, that the Ohio legislature thinks that need to be in these sorts of things for them to be legal. So if you go to the website for this 5 Wishes organization, the organization that's behind this, they actually give a link to a free document that you can get from the Ohio State Bar Association. All the lawyers in Ohio have created this document that actually covers all the stuff that you have to have a legal healthcare power of attorney and living will in Ohio, which is a little bit more extensive than what this five wishes thing covers. Also, it doesn't have a lot about it, but the five wishes does include a couple of questions concerning memorial services, those sorts of things, those kind of post-mortem rituals, songs that you want included, music that you want used, poems that you might want, anything that you would want to have included in something like that. That might seem like the least important part of the form, but it's also probably the most overlooked part. I'm remembering, when at family funerals and stuff, and the conversations that I've been involved in about, well, what would she want? And, I don't know, because we never talked about it, that sort of thing. I'm not looking forward to doing a funeral for any of you. Certainly not anytime soon, but if it becomes necessary, and if you want me to, I want to be sure that things would be included. That would be what you would want your family and loved ones to hear and experience at that kind of moment. In my earlier life, in the theater, I was in a play once. It was written by A.R. Gurney. It's called The Dining Room. It's a really weird play. It's a really interesting play where it's basically a series of scenes with the same actors playing different parts from one scene to the next. And the scenes occur at different points in time over the whole 20th century. It's really spread out, really, really interesting. But what ties the whole thing together is that it all set in the same dining room. And it sort of uses the dining room as a way to sort of examine the family, the American family, and how the American family has changed over time. There was one scene where I played a man in his 70s who was sitting down with his son, somewhat against the son's will, to have a conversation about what he wanted his funeral to be like, and walking through the whole process and where it should be and who should be invited and what should be included and what should happen and all this kind of stuff. So he's explaining to his middle-aged son what should happen. The sense I got from the script for that character was that the father was kind of trying to get some peace of mind, right? Thinking, I'm going to explain this to my son, and then I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about this anymore. I know it'll get done, and I'm going to lay it all out, and then I know it'll happen the way I want it to happen. That brings me to the last spiritual benefit of thinking about this sort of thing in advance. The Buddhist tradition emphasizes that going through the experience of dying, which all of us will do sooner or later, is the ultimate opportunity to achieve spiritual insight and liberation. It's the kind of ultimate opportunity for enlightenment. However, to achieve that requires a mind that's in a state of equanimity, a mind that's fairly peaceful. And that's impossible if you're worried about what's going to happen to my stuff and what's going to be done with my body and what's going to happen with my family, because none of that's been planned. If you haven't put any thought into any of that sort of stuff in advance, and your mind is focused on worrying about all of those sorts of things as you're going through the process of dying, then that's going to cloud that experience. It's going to sort of prevent that spiritual benefit that might otherwise happen. So if we know, on the other hand, that all those practical issues are taken care of, I don't have to worry about that, everything's settled, everything's taken care of, then the mind can be more peaceful. The mind can be more in that state of equanimity, and we can focus on the spiritual and emotional experience that we're going through as we go through that process. So as living beings, our mortality is the clearest way that impermanence expresses itself in our lives, and we need to engage with that. right? We shouldn't deny it. We shouldn't try to hide from it. For our own sake, we need to do that for the sake of those that we're going to leave behind. Inevitably, we need to do that as well. Sangbola Shipshio, may you and all beings manifest enlightenment.